Only two things I'm scared of in life. God first and the FBI.
So far on the Clout Chronicles, we've covered everything there is to know about 6ix9ine. The humble career birth, the development of his persona, the explosive sexual misconduct charges, the meteoric rise to fame, the wild ride joining the 9 Trey Bloods, and of course the many, many beefs that he got himself involved in. But I am sure, like many of you, find nothing more entertaining than the dramatic and frankly embarrassing fall of this clout-chasing clownfish. No, this sharpie-faced fuckknuckle. No, that's not right. This sentient pride flag. Nah, you know what, Camille, just cut it there. Like, I don't really think I'm feeling this. Like, I don't want to just keep making jokes about 6ix9ine, you know? I've spent all of this time researching him. I don't know, I've started to feel like I relate to him, you know? He spent all of his time starting beefs on the internet and making fun of rappers. Like, that's what I do, you know? I feel a close connection to the guy, you know? And I just doesn't feel right just constantly making fun of him and hating on him, you know? It feels like I'm hating on myself. I don't know, I need a break. I need to work on this script. We'll come back to this later. I don't know.
You can't touch me. Treyway, I created it. That's my shit. I'm the hottest. This kid got rainbow hair. This kid got 6ix9ine on his face.
Treyway.
Why is he jacking my shit? He not gangster.
Treyway. Ah! At the height of his fame, the relationship between 6ix9ine and the 9 Trey Bloods was simple. Keep making hits and sending money up the chain, and the 9 Trey gang would protect 6ix9ine from his ops, turning his brains into rainbow soup. It's an arrangement as old as time. Pay your protection money, and no beatdowns for you. However, paying Bloods to protect you ain't as easy as buying hair dye from Amazon Prime. You can't just get a refund when it doesn't work out and you end up looking like a total clown. And the moment 6ix9ine got embarrassingly dropped to the curb outside LAX airport like some kind of annoying mother-in-law, it didn't exactly look good for the 9 Trey Bloods that were supposed to be protecting him. And so the embarrassment of taking a violation so publicly led to a lot of infighting amongst the group. Now, when 6ix9ine first got acquainted with the 9 Trey Bloods, Shotty was the second in command underneath the Godfather Mel Murder. And at the time, Seiko Billy was a 5-star general under Shotty until he started to feel things were too hot and he took a step back from the group. Other crew members around this time included Fu Banger, Billiardo, Drama, Kuda B, Aljamiah, Nuke Mac, Anthony Harv Ellison, and Aaron Bat Young. Now, for a period of time, the group were also involved with a man named CEO Chris Cruz, who, as well as supplying drugs to the group, also had his own record label, AP, aka Always Paid, a label that he'd actually tried to sign 6ix9ine to in the early days. However, when Shotty realized the potential money-making opportunity that 6ix9ine represented, he strong-armed Chris out of the picture and fluffed up 6ix9ine until he believed that he was the big homie. Now, apparently, at a certain point, Harv and Nuke weren't too happy with this situation and begun to get disgruntled. Harv was actually the one who had done the punching and escalated things into a fight in that same incident outside LAX airport. So he was in no position to talk about people's embarrassing behavior leading to the crew taking public L's. But then, not too long after that, the crew took another embarrassing L in Houston where they got pressed by the son of this handsome little ragamuffin, J Prince Jr., aka the most disorganized concert host in America.
Y'all came to see 6ix9ine, huh? Where you at?
As soon as 6ix9ine and his crew arrived in Houston, they were immediately turned away from a party by J Prince Jr.'s little brother, J Prince Jr. Jr., aka Baby J Prince, aka lowercase J Prince, aka J Princess. And once again, after taking another embarrassing public L, members of the 9 Trey crew were pissed that this violation had been allowed to slide. Now, apparently things kicked off in a 9 Trey group chat that they had going. I know, seriously, these guys had a group chat going for their goddamn criminal enterprise. I bet the judge pissed his pants when he saw that. I doubt he left those messages on scene and shit. But anyway, following the news of that J Prince incident reaching the group chat, it was actually Harv who'd expressed his disappointment at the group for not handling this violation in a way truer to the 9 Trey Bloods' gangster way of life. Well, at least after mocking Shotty's habit of shaking barricades outside of nightclubs and screaming, "We the mob," because there's nothing more gangster than sarcasm, right? But from there, Harv began to rip into 6ix9ine himself for not really being gangster. Harv was essentially taking aim at 6ix9ine and using this situation as an opportunity to undermine Shotty's leadership of the crew. And it seemed to become clear from this chat that small rift in the group would soon expand to a gaping chasm on the verge of prolapse. Off the back of this chat, Harv and Billy Ardo actually flew out to Houston the next day to provide additional muscle for the crew. But once Harv arrived, he immediately started wiling out and made a phone call threatening 6ix9ine's videographer Trey and his friend Justin. This led to 6ix9ine completely avoiding Harv whilst in Houston, and ultimately, after J Prince Jr. had stormed the World Star stage at South by Southwest where 6ix9ine was supposed to be recording, he didn't even end up performing that night. The fact that 6ix9ine had been publicly pressed once again after Harv had flown out to provide some muscle only pissed him off more. And at this point, it seemed like Harv and 6ix9ine had become fully certified ops. So from this moment on, it was clear that Harv and Billy Ardo were not Team Rainbow. But at the same time, they were still members of the 9 Trey Bloods, and so Harv was taken off of the 6ix9ine crew, and Shotty and 6ix9ine hired outside help to come and assist in security matters. One example of this outside help was the likes of Fahim Crippy Walter, a beefy security guard who was actually drafted in from the Crips, not a member of the 9 Trey Bloods, for the specific purpose of adding additional muscle to protect the rainbow-headed package. However, in addition to new muscle, new leadership was about to come to the group. And this came in the form of freshly released 9 Trey OG Ro Murder, who unfortunately, as we would find out later on, would ultimately get rown all the way down Schitt's Creek. In April, Roland Martin, aka Ro Murder, was released from jail after serving around 10 years. A fact that 6ix9ine was all too eager to show off on Instagram.
My brother just came home, you know what I'm saying? Did 10, now he free.
Ro was a respected member of the 9 Trey Bloods behind the wall, and upon his release, the Godfather Mel Murder put him in charge of Shotty and 6ix9ine's crew, affectionately known as Murderville. Ro was actually the head honcho of the group at the time of the robbery of Junior Boy, the Rap-A-Lot affiliate that Treyway had robbed at gunpoint at the lobby of the This Is 50 offices in New York, ultimately as revenge for the violation that they took in Houston at the hands of J Prince Jr.'s Rap-A-Lot crew. And apparently for a period, everything was running smoothly for the 9 Trey Bloods operation. Tekashi's shit-talking had the streams coming in as the 9 Trey goons continued to flex their muscles and keep him out harm's way. And of course, with 6ix9ine's humongous injection of cash, the Murderville crew had more guns on deck than T.I.'s trunk. And most importantly of all, CEO Chris's low-quality fentanyl was running freely through the streets of New York and betwixt the toes of Bushwick's most distinguished tweakers. But it wasn't all good amongst some members of the 9 Trey Bloods. And apparently, tensions begun to emerge later on that month when members of the crew were together in a strip club, and it looked for a moment like Harv and Nuke were about to make a move against the Murderville crew. And then bizarrely, not long after this, 6ix9ine and Shotty caught a real curveball whilst they were at the Met Stadium, seemingly throwing up gang signs with a giant baseball. But hey, don't get it twisted, that baseball is a double OG blood. But no really, whilst chilling out with that giant baseball, Shotty had learned that Nuke had actually made a move against the Murderville set and robbed Ro Murder. Apparently Nuke had asked Ro to set 6ix9ine up for him. Well, Ro turned around and said no, and a confrontation ensued where shots were fired. And so not long after this, while 6ix9ine was in LA, he found out that an all-out gang war had erupted in the 9 Trey Bloods.
Now nothing brings down real estate prices quicker than a good old-fashioned gang war.
One side being Ro Murder and Shotty's crew, the Murderville set that controlled the Sterling territory, and on the other side, a disgruntled Nuke who had been running the Smurf Village territory in alliance with Harv, the 6ix9ine entourage reject. So these two crews became certified ops and were immediately out for each other's bloods, because they're bloods. Now, I'm sure a lot of street shit went down behind the scenes in the months that followed these incidents, but I'm only working with what information is publicly available online. But from what we know publicly, this beef truly got sizzling like a BYO blood BBQ in July, because when Nuke, Harv, and Billy Ardo went live from a barbecue on their block in Smurf Village, Shotty and the Sterling set had finally got the drop on their ops. Apparently, Shotty went on a ride out and pulled up on the Smurf Village block, letting off shots. But now we know why they call him Shotty instead of Amy, because rather than getting his ops, he ended up hitting an innocent bystander in the foot. A serious criminal mistake that would end up coming back to haunt him when he would finally get his day in front of a judge. And it turns out that Smurf Village were not about to sleep on that violation, because around a week later, we would see the infamous kidnapping of our boy Big Spine.
The chains don't actually mean nothing. I just wanted to get my chain snatched one day. Like, I always thought, like, when I saw rappers get their chain snatched, that was always like mad funny, so I wanted to see if someone was actually willing to snatch my shit.
On July 22nd, 2018, Harv and his buddy Shah decide to get some get back on 6ix9ine. As 6ix9ine was leaving a club appearance in New York, he was picked up by his driver Jorge, who had recently started wearing suspiciously large hats. I think it might have had something to do with that meeting that he had with Ice earlier in the year. Anywho, Jorge plans to drive him to Trife Drew's house to make changes to the Fifi video. I'm not sure you're going to be able to fix that dodgy focus in post, Trife. Okay, sorry, moving on. As Jorge and 6ix9ine are driving through New York, out of nowhere, a car slams them from behind. An experience that 6ix9ine's probably a lot more used to after spending 2 years in jail. After Jorge steps out of the car to have a word with the shunting driver, at this point Harv and Shah jump out of their car, run up to the truck with guns, and snatch a shaken 6ix9ine out of the whip.
Run it, nigga. Give me everything, nigga. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get in the car. Get in the car. Get in the car, nigga.
6ix9ine pleaded with Harv not to hurt him and tried to remind him that he'd done right by him and even given him $25K.
Oh, you know I gave you $25K. I always did right by you.
Yeah, but why you do me like that, bro?
I always put money in your pocket, bro. I'm scared, bro. I don't know if you feel like you're extortionist.
From there, 6ix9ine was kidnapped and taken in the car with Harv and Shah. He was pistol whipped and even recorded saying 3 times, "I'm not Billy," essentially denouncing his relationship with the 9 Trey Bloods. Eventually, they drove 6ix9ine to his house where his baby mama Sarah Molina was staying, and she came down and gave over all of his jewelry in exchange for his life.
He was like, "I want you to take the jewelry that I have downstairs on the table and wrap it the way I wrap it and put it in the bag and bring it down to me." I'm like, what's going on? So at this point, I'm not thinking that he's in any danger. I'm thinking that he did something.
Amongst the jewels taken was a blooded out presidential Rolex with Roman numeral dials that he'd worn in several videos, a fairly new $95,000 My Little Pony chain that had his own rainbow pubes attached to it, a $300,000 jigsaw chain with real gurning action, as well as his signature $150K spinning 6ix9ine chain.
Anyway, man. Anywhere it goes, still 6ix9ine, man. Still 6ix9ine, anywhere it go.
Now, after getting 6ix9ine's jewelry, they drove around with him a little longer before eventually letting him out of the car, right in the enemy turf of Smurf Village, where he took off running. Tell you what, I wouldn't want to be a blood in Smurf Village. I hear that shit's full of blue rag rockin' Crips. But after taking off running, 6ix9ine actually jumped in a random passerby's car and got them to drop him off at the precinct where he requested medical attention. He was eventually taken to hospital where, of course, this iconic photo was taken, and the doctors initially incorrectly diagnosed him with a Skittles overdose before looking closer and realizing he'd been pistol whipped. When 6ix9ine got out of the hospital, he told Shotty and Mel Murder what happened. So, Shotty turned up with a big assault rifle and spent the evening spinning the block, riding around in his black Benz looking for Harv. And 6ix9ine himself had said in court that he'd even put out a $50,000 bounty for anyone that could rob Harv in retaliation for this incident. Now, after the kidnapping, 6ix9ine tried to clean up his image, which is always going to be tough when you've got an image that seems to have been modelled on the wall of a crack den men's room. But he began trying to behave professionally. He finally got himself real security, hiring several different private security groups, including the Shadow Group, who offered the help of their signature man tank, Biggs. Jesus, look at the size of this guy. He'd crush my head like a melon. So with the help of his security, 6ix9ine would start moving like a boss, surrounded by giant goons like the president of some sort of disco island.
Look at you all out here and shit, scaring the shit out of motherfuckers.
And saying that he felt like Ariana Grande when he moved with his security.
I feel like Ariana Grande when I'm with my security.
Yeah.
Hey, yo, bro, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Now remember, Harv did say to 6ix9ine while they were beefing that he should stop gangbanging and get real security. And it kind of turned out that this underhandedly menacing pointer was actually pretty damn good advice, because the beef between the two warring factions of 9 Trey was just heating up. In fact, later when things went to trial, rumours emerged that that shooting on the Get the Strap video in August may have been carried out by disgruntled 9 Trey members rather than the original culprit, Chief Keef. And then, famously, whilst trying to film a music video in a rented mansion with Kanye West and Nicki Minaj, someone fired off some shots at the building and caused the entire shoot to be shut down. And once again, this was rumoured to maybe have something to do with the 9 Trey gang war, or potentially having something to do with 6ix9ine's earlier skirmishes with YG and Slim 400. But regardless of who was responsible, the trouble was not over for 6ix9ine. And only a few days later in September, Nuke ended up committing Grand Theft Auto Row by stealing Roe Murder's car. Apparently yet another massive point of embarrassment to the Roe Murder-led Sterling set of the gang. And apparently this incident was the final straw, leading to senior members of the 9 Trey organization behind the wall, Goo, and Frank White, to officially cast Nuke out of the gang. But the internal squabbles of the 9 Trey gang are absolutely nothing compared to the trouble that was on the horizon coming from the biggest ops of all, the goddamn FBI. And as the 9 Trey war waged on, and while 6ix9ine was in Dubai banging Movlog's sister,
I'm here with the Queen of Dubai. Trey, you know that shit.
The feds raided his home in Brooklyn and found that assault rifle that Shotty had bought round after the kidnapping, along with that Scum Gang backpack that was stolen in the April Rapperlock robbery, which contained personal items belonging to Scumlord Dizzy that tied 6ix9ine to that robbery. Now, I'm no big city gangbanger, but if members of my team were getting raided by the FBI, I'd probably keep a low profile. But you know, apparently they the mob, so instead of toning it down and trying not to go to jail, on October 24th, Shotty sent one of his goons, a guy named Guns and his boy Pablo, in Shotty's Benz over to Smurf Village to shoot Harv. And I get it, you know, send a guy called Guns, that's who you want shooting really, isn't it? However, once again, this escalation was unsuccessful. And whilst they did get to shooting, they didn't get Harv. They tragically ended up hitting one of his friends and paralyzing him. Immediately after this, in a revenge attack, Harv found one of Guns' friends, a guy named Mark, and brutally slashed his face. Yeah, there's not really much funny about that, to be honest. And I'd say it's around this point that this story frankly starts to get very, very bleak indeed. Because this is the turning point where the story goes from a wild ride in the world of gangbanging for clout to the genuine reality of getting involved in a dangerous gang war and showing the real cost of pushing these beefs to their natural real-world conclusions. And as 6ix9ine would very soon work out, once you're in, it is very hard to get out. Now, 6ix9ine's sexual misconduct trial had been whirring on in the background for many years. Now, he'd actually pled guilty to the use of a child in a sexual performance charge that occurred way back in 2015, and the terms of his plea were generous, giving him ample time to meet several conditions, including completing his GED and being told to stay out of trouble. However, as we know, as the years went by, the trouble continued to roll in, particularly that incident where he choked a teenager in Texas that was trying to take a picture of him, and another incident where he'd driven without a license. So in late 2018, the court were hauling him back in to finally decide his fate. But instead of throwing on a neck brace and doing the Weinstein shuffle, he stood tall, tucked in his shirt and tied up his... oh, okay, maybe not. I swear he must have borrowed that shirt from Biggs. Anyway, eventually his fate was finally decided in an explosive court date that went down only 2 days after that latest Smurf Village shootout. And luckily for 6ix9ine, he escaped jail time and was given 4 years probation. Now at the time, during this period, it seemed like 6ix9ine was just getting lucky break after lucky break when it came to his legal issues. But in hindsight, you can certainly see why the feds would have rather had him running around with 9 Trey, helping them incriminate themselves further every single day than sitting in the slammer on 3-year-old charges. So following 6ix9ine getting that spectacular news that justice had finally not been served, he headed to that exclusive New York dinner spot in favour of Yo Gotti's, Philippe Chow's. There he'd be having a celebratory dinner with his label boss and the son of Universal Music Group CEO, Elliot Grange. Now you can't be the son of the literal head honcho of UMG, probably the most powerful music organisation in the world, and not be moving correctly in these streets. So we know that Elliot was there with some serious ex-cop, gun-packing, Navy SEAL moving motherfuckers. And so when Shotty and other members of the 9 Trey crew arrived without invitations to that dinner party, Elliot's security told this bunch of troublemaking gang members to scram. Scared of getting in any more trouble, having just gotten 4 years probation on that case, story goes 6ix9ine immediately left the venue at the sight of trouble. However, Shotty, Crippy, and other members of 9 Trey went back to the restaurant to have words with security. Well, these words very quickly evolved into fists. Those fists evolved into chairs being thrown at Grange's private security, one of which whipped out a pistol and ended up shooting Crippy in the stomach, leaving him with life-changing injuries. And to add insult to injury, after the fights, the feds ended up finding Crippy's phone at the scene, unlocking yet more inside info on the kinds of crimes that the 9 Trey crew had been up to. Now at this point, 6ix9ine is keeping pretty tight-lipped about these incidents, but we can assume that he's not loving the behaviour of his former crew. I mean, imagine the day that you get a massive W and avoid jail time on this case that's been following you around for years, these guys rock up and get to clapping. Not a good look. But at a certain point following the Philippe Chow incident, 6ix9ine makes yet another dramatic discovery about his former crew. Turns out his team had shorted him of show money to the tune of millions of dollars. And he discovered through conversations with a show booker that rather than the $60K a show that he'd been receiving from his crew, concert arrangers had been paying someone in his team around $300,000 a show without his knowledge, and pocketing the difference without his knowledge. That ain't skimming off the top. That's gulping down the whole gallon of milk and only letting you have the leftover burp gas at the bottom of the jug. At this point, a livid 6ix9ine immediately takes to Instagram, announcing the cancellation of his booked American tour and firing his whole team publicly.
What's up, everybody? So I'm letting everybody know that I canceled my whole tour. The American dates is not happening. I fired everybody in my team. I got no manager, I got no booking agent, no PR, no public. I don't got nobody on my team. It's just me. Whoever is booking shows for Tekashi 6ix9ine is stealing your fucking money. I fired everybody. I don't give a fuck who you used to see me with. They no longer around. It's a fucking dub.
He then followed that up with an explosive Breakfast Club interview where he denounced Treyway and his former team as a bunch of thieving dirty bloods and outlined how he'd been ripped off.
I said, I'm not going to the show. Why are you not going to the show? It's 60,000. Like, my rate, everybody know my rate is 100K and over. Are you crazy? We just put the 80,000 front end in. How many shows you got? He said, y'all got most of the shows on this thing. I said, all right. How much? He said, we got you for like a couple dates. You just signed to 3.6 million. So it's not 300,000?
Wow, what the hell? Get
listen to me. Everybody is gone. Get out of my life. Get out of here. Everybody.
Wow. I thought you were signed to them through whatever, so you're not at all.
Nah.
Well, as you can imagine, this didn't go down too well with the Treyway. And the feds at this point intercepted a wiretapped call of 9 Trey godfather Mel Murder saying that they needed to super violate 6ix9ine for his public disrespect.
You trying to suck me yourself.
That's cool, but now he gotta get violated.
Yeah, super violated. super duper. So ain't too much he can really do unless he gonna run around with 100 armed securities all day. You know what I'm saying? He gonna get shot at penny.
And according to court documents, this is when 6ix9ine was approached by the FBI directly, informing him of the threat on his life and offering him protection, which he duly denied. And the next day he was arrested because apparently the FBI feared that Shotty would attack 6ix9ine in public and cause a danger to civilians. And after all, it was also said on wiretap that apparently at this point Shotty had pretty much nothing left to lose.
You don't got nothing to lose no more. This is all you have.
Well, he better get to violating. He better stalk Shorty every move. One of them security better get hit. Something better happen.
So at this point, the entire 9 Trey house of cards begins to fall. Everyone gets locked up on a humongous RICO charge. And to make matters worse, as soon as 6ix9ine got to jail, he immediately got pressed by some Crips and had to be moved. Let's keep it real. It's absolutely no surprise that this Skittle-scalped scurry bandit decided to cooperate with the feds within days of getting arrested. Bloods in the street wanted him dead, Bloods and Crips in jail wanted him dead, and he'd likely be facing a sentence of around 47 years if convicted on this RICO charge. And it's important to remember that RICO charges are based on the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. These are far-reaching federal laws designed to pin the overall illegal criminal acts of an entire criminal organization onto all of the members that are involved, even those that didn't personally commit offenses. As DJ Drama would say, these are the big boy boss crime laws, and the government boasts an impeccable 93% conviction rate for this kind of crime. Long story short, you catch a RICO, you are certified fucked. Now, the original indictment named 6 people: Daniel 6ix9ine Hernandez, Kifano Shotty Jordan, Jamel Mel Murder or Mel Matrix Jones, Jensel Ish Butler, Fugan Fu Banger Lovick, and Fahim Crippy Walter. And being a RICO charge, it was mainly concerned with pinning the whole violent criminal 9 Trey enterprise onto all of these named members. But particularly, it identified the following acts of violence having been committed in aid of the 9 Trey criminal enterprise: the April 3rd robbery of Scumlord Dizzy and Junior Boy, the April 21st shooting incident that occurred in the streets before the Barclays Center shooting, the Barclays Center shooting that occurred that evening, the July 2nd Chief Keef shooting in Times Square, and the July 16th Smurf Village shootout where a bystander was hit. It also pinned on the whole organization the general illegal carrying of firearms, and whilst all of these crimes were covered under the RICO, I just want to add for the record, the court observed that as far as they knew, at no point had the gang actually committed any murders in furtherance of their enterprise. Essentially discrediting that famous lyric that was even played in court during this trial, where 6ix9ine says his whole squad's full of killers and he's a killer too. Incidentally, the initial indictment was just for acts of violence, but as the case progressed, narcotics counts were added to a superseding indictment along with several other co-defendants. So added to the mix were Kintea Kuda B. McKenzie for his and Shotty's involvement in arranging the Times Square shooting, Anthony Harv Ellison for the Smurf Village shootouts as well as the kidnapping of 6ix9ine, Denard Drama Butler for just being a member of the racket, and Aaron Bat Young for using a firearm to protect a drug dealing operation, and specifically the shooting of Snow Billy. And then finally, Aljamiah Nuke Mack for his involvement in the kidnapping and pistol whipping of 6ix9ine. Now let's be real, the prosecution had a lot of evidence way beyond simple surveillance footage of the many acts of violence that 9 Trey members committed. That raid on 6ix9ine's house brought up the assault rifle, the stolen Scum backpack that had several of Scumlord Dizzy's identifiable items in it, including his passport. The cops had discovered a gun in Roe Murder's car after that was repoed by the feds. They had social media posts and physical search and seizure of around 20 phones belonging to 9 Trey members. Well, it looks like FBI really did enter the chat in this case, and I doubt they left any of those messages on scene and shit. Oh no, they got messages, call logs, GPS data, and even in some cases, full iCloud account access. So we can assume they got a full selection of Shotty's nudes, as well as exclusive access to the Treyway iCalendar account. In fact, they said that there was so much evidence contained in 6ix9ine's Instagram account that it was hard for the court to even comb it. They had recordings of prison calls between 9 Trey members that were apparently incriminating in nature. And in addition to all of that, before 6ix9ine even turned snitch, they had 2 other confidential informants. 6ix9ine's driver Jorge, who had flipped ages ago after having been picked up by ICE for an immigration violation, and that's actually why footage of the kidnapping later emerged, because Jorge's truck had been wired by the feds for video and sound. In addition to that, 6ix9ine's old manager and the 9 Trey fentanyl plug CEO Christian Cruz had also turned confidential informant, recording several incriminating conversations with numerous 9 Trey members, including Mel Murder. And following his decision to turn state witness a day after getting arrested, 6ix9ine provided the feds with a lot of info. Apparently, over the course of his cooperation, 6ix9ine met with the feds 26 times to provide information. And the info he provided is actually what allowed the government to add 4 additional charges to the superseding indictment. In particular, he pointed out Anthony Harv Ellison's involvement in the racket, in the July kidnapping, and in the October face slashing. Denard Drama Butler's involvement in the RICO for being muscle during the Rap-A-Lot robbery, Kintea Kuda B. Butler's involvement in the Times Square shooting that he had ordered, and Aljamiah Nuke Mac's involvement in the overall criminal enterprise. And it's important to point out at this point, 9 Trey was fucked regardless of whether 6ix9ine snitched or not. These guys had already been caught slipping in a big way. The feds already had 2 insiders flipped and wearing wires. So 6ix9ine really just took this deal to save his own bacon, because there ain't no other way that he was walking out on that 93% conviction rate. But regardless, he had so much information that once his involvement became public around February 2019, this triggered several 9 Trey co-defendants in the case to throw in the towel and cop plea bargains. Jamel Mel Murder, or Mel Matrix Jones, the godfather of the 9 Trey street lineup, pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy and narcotics distribution conspiracy. After all, he was already certifiably fucked after having been caught selling a kilo of fentanyl to an undercover cop, and he was duly given a sentence of around 11 years. Then the only recently implemented head honcho of the Sterling lineup of the crew, Ro Murder, who'd initially been on the run from these charges before getting caught in a dramatic capture, also pled guilty to racketeering, landing himself in jail for another 66 months. And in one of the sadder aspects of this case, apparently after all of this was resolved, he publicly resigned from the 9 Trey Bloods in front of fellow inmates in jail. And apparently this led to a vicious retaliation where he was stabbed 9 times and left fighting for his life. Mr. Treyway himself, Shotty, pled guilty to 2 firearms charges and ended up catching a 15-year sentence. Well, after all, I'm pretty sure shouting Treyway in court wasn't such a good idea. Fubanger pled guilty for his role in the Barclay shooting, as well as having been generally identified as a shooter for the crew, with the judge initially rejecting 2 guilty pleas after he kept trying to word them in a way that claimed self-defense, but eventually a guilty plea for that Barclay shooting was accepted. Kinte Kuda B. McKenzie pled guilty to arranging the Times Square shooting on Chief Keef, whilst avoiding being identified as the actual shooter in that incident. Aaron Bat Young pled guilty to racketeering and ended up getting 20 years. His plea interestingly didn't name Snow Billy by name, but simply pointed out acts of violence as part of his role in the 9 Trey enterprise, though he did specifically admit his role in shooting Snow Billy in the head at a hearing. It's also worth saying that at this hearing, the judge pointed out that Aaron Young had played a role in selling 9 kilos of fentanyl for 9 Trey. Now that's what I call drug dealing. Denard Drama Butler pled guilty to taking part in a criminal enterprise and ended up getting 60 months. Jenzel Ish Butler pled guilty for the same thing, also getting 60 months. And yet another sad outcome of this case was Fahim Crippy Walter, a Crip who wasn't even 9 Trey to begin with, but was only drafted in as private security after the LAX incident, was still unfortunately on the hook for his involvement in the Rap-A-Lot robbery and for taking the gun that was used in that robbery from 6ix9ine after he was kicked out of the car by a nervous Shotty. Crippy also nearly got in trouble for apparently live streaming whilst in jail, but thankfully the judge actually ended up letting this slide, saying that this was a mere statement of "I'm still standing," and weirdly kind of commending him for even being able to get a phone in the MCC facility, the same jail that Jeffrey Epstein was being held in around the same time. But then again, the guards in that jail do seem to be napping an awful lot, and the judge did credit him for not actually using the gun that had been handed to him, and also expressing some sympathy at the fact that when he'd been shot outside Philippe Chow's, he was left having to use a colostomy bag for life. And as a result, the judge gave him a below guideline sentence of 68 months with a 5-year minimum, apparently prompting applause in the courtroom. That's some quality judging right there. However, after all of those guilty pleas, it was 6ix9ine's wildest ops, Aljamiah Nuke Mac and Anthony Harv Ellison, who decided not to plead guilty. Instead, they attempted to stand up for themselves and style out the kidnapping of 6ix9ine as some kind of publicity stunt that was pre-arranged to promote his career. Now, I'm not sure what law school their lawyers went to, but I'm guessing that their law degrees were printed on a goddamn napkin, because that shit went south real quick. 6ix9ine famously took the stand and testified for 3 days straight, with recordings of some of his testimony even secretly getting recorded and leaked online, with the judge openly admonishing the court for this embarrassing security breach. 6ix9ine's testimony was devastating at sealing the fate of Nuke and Harv, but the majority of media attention seemed to focus on throwaway comments that he made tying Jim Jones, Cardi B and Trippie Redd to the Bloods. Hell, even at times he was cracking jokes on the stand. When asked if Treyway was a legit business, he said that Shotty had tried to make it legit, in the same way that he might try and shoot a 3-pointer but not make it, as well as saying to the court that he'd driven a handful of times, and then when pressed on how many times he said 6, updating his estimation to 2 handfuls. After all, I'm sure he got his fair share of handfuls in jail. But what was more interesting than what little info he actually gave on the stand was the admissions contained in his own guilty plea agreement. As part of his participation as state's witness, 6ix9ine 6ix9ine had pled guilty to 9 federal charges of racketeering, firearms, and drug trafficking offenses. And as part of his plea agreement, 6ix9ine admitted to several crimes and even gave the government information on crimes that he committed that weren't even pertinent to the case. This included the assault of Trippie Redd by Shotty and Harv outside Trippie's hotel, another Times Square shooting that hadn't even received much coverage at this point. This was the shooting of Frenchie BSM, a Pyru blood who the 9 Trey wanted to violate because he was in New York providing protection for Trippie Redd without checking in with 9 Trey. And it turns out that Shotty had waited for him outside Quad Studios in Manhattan, eventually shooting 5 times at his Sprinter van in an incident where no one was injured. He of course copped to being outside during the Rap-A-Lot robbery, filming the whole damn thing. He admitted that in that day that the Barclay shooting took place, Shotty had assaulted someone who shouted "fuck 6ix9ine" from a passing car, and when they'd realised that car had followed them, Shotty jumped out of the whip and fired shots. And this was actually that famous clip that you might have seen on TMZ. Of course, he admitted to his role in the Casanova shooting that had taken place backstage at the Barclays, as well as admitting that he knew Fu Banger to be the shooter of the crew under Roe Murder's orders, as well as saying that on that night in question, it was Shotty that had told Fu Banger to let off shots in the Barclays. He copped to ordering the Times Square shooting of Chief Keef. He elaborated on that first Smurf Village shootout where Shotty had shot a bystander, saying the whole thing had come about when they'd spotted Billy Ado on a live, suggesting that Shotty had wanted to make the block hot. He admitted that Shotty rode around with an assault rifle after the kidnapping, as well as putting a $50,000 bounty on Ellison's head, being aware of another attempt on Ellison's life by another member. He admitted to paying a man $200 to $300 to bring guns from Atlanta to New York on the bus for the 9 Trey. He admitted to getting $2,000 for helping middleman, a 1 kilo heroin deal between a 9 Trey member and another individual, and probably most importantly of all, over the course of his 26 meetings with federal officials during this case, apparently he had helped the government make sense of the huge cachet of media from seized phones, social media, and wiretap calls. And so, with all of that in mind, Nuke and Harv were duly fucked. They both ended up getting guilty verdicts on their RICO charges, the kidnapping and the slashing in Smurf Village. In fact, the only things that they managed to slide and get a not guilty verdict on was Ellison's use of a weapon during the kidnapping and a separate firearm count for Mac. And with that, pretty much the entire senior management of the 9 Trey Bloods, an organization rich in criminal history, having started in 1993 on Rikers Island, crumbled at the hands of one rainbow-headed goon. But one question remains. What did the court have to say about our chum, 6ix9ine? In exchange for his testimony, 6ix9ine was given a 5K1 cooperation letter. This got him off the hook for that 47-year minimum sentence that he was initially facing for those RICO charges. And in the end, he was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison, with credit for his 13 months already served in the lead up to the trial, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. And interestingly, while 6ix9ine was waiting around for sentencing, numerous letters of good character were sent in to the judge. His older brother Oscar, who you might recognize from this dreadful face tattoo, well, this one I guess, he said that his brother had been exploited by the venomous 9 Trey group. His mother had commended him for all the support that he'd given with her ongoing health conditions. His girlfriend Jade wrote a seemingly unhelpful letter, pointlessly pointing out that they'd only known each other for a few weeks in the lead up to his arrest, but urging the judge to release him sooner so he could buy her more G-Wagons. 6ix9ine's head of security wrote a long letter outlining how well he'd gotten to know him during the protection assignment, detailing having watched him give handfuls of money to homeless people in the streets of foreign countries, in the scenes that we saw at the end of the Gotti video, and how he'd comforted numerous terminally ill child fans at the height of his fame, famously giving a sick 5-year-old boy named Franklin his first ever diamond ring, and then going on to surprise the family of that boy by paying their rent for an entire year so that they could spend more time with their dying son. That same security guard pointed out that he felt that this gang had saw an opportunity in 6ix9ine and were only seeking to exploit his success for their own gain, saying that he felt that Danny is a kid from the street but not a street kid. The Union City cop who had actually arranged 6ix9ine's visit to the dying child wrote a statement commending him for the help that he'd given to that child's family, as well as testifying to having seen him provide food and clothes, as well as sitting in prayer for homeless citizens within his community. There was a letter from the son of legendary Latin musician Johnny Pacheco, Ellis Pacheco, who discussed meeting 6ix9ine way back in 2016 and his ongoing patronage of their charitable foundation. Elliot Grange, the head of 10,000 Projects, 6ix9ine's label, detailed an incident in March 2018 where 6ix9ine gave an inspirational speech and a $10,000 donation to his old high school. The founder of Thrive Global, the domestic violence charity, discussed his involvement in the organization following his conviction in his 2015 case, and the founder of America's most influential children's brain cancer nonprofit discussed a significant financial contribution 6ix9ine had made to the organization. Look, we all know that 6ix9ine did a lot of bad, but less people want to talk about all the good that he did. And with mountains of good character evidence like this, it's hard to believe that he was doing all of this good just for clout or to try and get time off potential future jail sentences. He's discussed in numerous interviews his passion for doing good in the community, even in addition to his relentless trolling.
The kid that I was back in the day,
I didn't have a person coming to school and giving 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. I'll make sure I do that in my community, and that's why I'm the king of my city. But let's start this prayer.
Let's say a prayer, my brother. Let's say it.
And sure, we can't gloss over the violence that he was involved in, the relentless trolling, and the dangerous beefs that often spilled into the streets. But it's very important to remember, 6ix9ine was a young kid who was brought in to a well-established criminal gang organization that had been going since 1993. The 9 Trey Bloods were older than 6ix9ine, and the men around him who were egging him on, extorting him, and getting rich off the back of his shenanigans should have known better, because they were all leading him down a rainbow-paved pathway to hell. I personally remember in that first Breakfast Club interview, when Charlemagne asked 6ix9ine if he could speak to one of his OGs, you could immediately tell that Shorty didn't have his best interests in heart.
I want to talk to one of your OGs.
So whether he's on the internet saying, I'm gangster, come touch me, come take my chain, that's how he feels and what he wants to promote. We don't check in nowhere with anybody. Having relationships with somebody is something totally different than checking in.
Because in all this mess, everyone was so quick to judge 6ix9ine as a rat or a scumbag, but you need to remember one thing. He didn't convince the 9 Trey Bloods to bring him into the fold because they liked rainbow hair or scream rap. They brought him into the gang because he had a lot of money, was easily manipulated, and ripe for their extortion. But rather than extort him by simply pressing him, they extorted him by fluffing up his egos, convincing him he was one of the boys, and putting him in some very dangerous situations. And by the time that he'd gotten wise to the fact that he was being taken advantage of and getting sent down the wrong path, it was too late, and their only option was to end his life. So having spent all of this time getting inside the mind of 6ix9ine, I can only draw one conclusion, which I know is controversial, but to me it's absolutely true. 6ix9ine wasn't a gangster who snitched. He was a good kid who was ultimately willing to do literally anything to improve the circumstances for himself and his family, and got in way too deep. And ultimately, snitching wasn't him turning on his gang buddies, but it was actually him doing the right thing, coming clean about all of the wrong that he'd done up until that point, and taking one last opportunity to use the gifts that he'd been given to do good in the world. And I know that a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but when 6ix9ine gets out of jail, he's still going to have a lot to give to the world. And not just in terms of music, but also in positivity and philanthropy. Because if he could make it out of this experience alive, survive all of the things that he's been through, reform himself, become a good person, a valued member of the community, and contribute to the world, then maybe, just maybe, there's hope for the rest of us. And look, I know not everyone is, but I personally am very excited for that day he gets out. And I'll be there listening to every single song, rooting for this rainbow-headed clout demon to do better with his second chance. Thanks for watching. What's good, everyone? It's your boy Traplord Ross, and I want to thank every single one of you for getting this far and sticking with me watching the entire Clout Chronicles. This whole series really meant a lot to me, and I'm so pleased to have gotten this finished and to be able to share this story with you guys. I want to give a huge shout out to my amazing and talented editor, Camille. I wouldn't have been able to put this series together at all if it wasn't for her amazing skills, her amazing help, and just being an all-round dope editor, person, killer when it comes to making these videos, so huge shout out to her. I also want to thank Isabella at Live True London for making me look like a rainbow-headed fool for this finale. I just thought that'd be really fun, and I really appreciate the amazing job that she did on my hair, even though it's a little bit faded after a couple of weeks of editing. I want to thank The Ordinary Guy for all of his help in supporting me getting this video done and accompanying me to get this ridiculous hair dye job done. And I also want to thank every single one of my Patreon supporters who supported the channel and made this possible with their generous contributions and ongoing support. So a huge thank you to the likes of Noah Carter, Candy Cantrell, Jason Four, Sean Anderson, Javier Gonzalez, Monique Vivret McKay, DJ Fred 100, Henrik, Henry Bryan, Josh Knappin, Niraj Shukla, Galib, Chris J, Dylan Stuber, Tony Doe, Penis Bag McPenis Face, yeah I said it, and finally Wilson Psychedelic, as well as everybody else whose names you can see on the screen right now. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate your support. To anybody else that wants to support the channel and get their name in the credits, head on over to patreon.com/TraplordRoss. It really means a lot to me, and it really gives me a lot of confidence to keep these videos coming and keep producing dope content for you guys. Make sure that you go and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and all of that good stuff at TraplordRoss. And if you want to support the channel even further and rep the brand gang, and make sure you head on over to www.traplord.com and go and cop some of that fire merch that your boy been rocking, which I actually don't have on right now because I'm at my mama's house and I didn't pack it with me because I'm a phony. I know a lot of people are tired of hearing about 6ix9ine stuff. I'm tired of looking at 6ix9ine's goddamn Rainbow Phase 2, but from next week, we will be jumping back into the regular scheduled programming. I've got some really exciting stories covering the likes of Juice WRLD, Bobby Shmurda, Birdman, and I've even got a very personal favourite story of mine that's going to be covering your boy Tim Westwood, which is probably one of the stories that I'm most excited about coming up on the channel. So super excited to share all of those with you, and just thank you again. This series has meant a whole lot to me, and I'm really glad to have got it in front of you guys. So till next time, thank you and peace out.